What's up, guys? My name is Lily. Welcome to the Pretest Pump Up. I am so excited that you're here. This is one of my absolute favorite classes of Demon. It's something that I wish I would have had before I took my official test, and that's exactly why this exists. I think one of the problems with LSAT studying is that it can feel really isolating and like no one understands what you're going through or how big of a deal this test can really begin to feel for you. So that's why we're meeting here tonight, right? We want you to know that not only are you not alone, you have so many other people who are going through this exact same experience, but you also have a team of people here who are on your side, who are rooting for you. And we just want to try to give you the best advice and tips that we possibly can. So that's the goal. Like I said, we're really open to chatting about anything. So let us know any questions. But I think the way that we'll sort of kick things off tonight is by first introducing ourselves, giving a little bit of background to our stories, and then maybe capping that off with one of our best tips or suggestions for test day. So I'll go first. I'll give a quick highlight of my story. I started studying with the Demon late 2021. I had a 144 diagnostic, so I knew I had a lot of work cut out for me. I took my first official test in June of 2022, got a 171. But I knew I had a few more points on the table, so I retook the test 2 more times to get a 174, which was my final score. I will say that being consistent and sticking with it was one of my biggest struggles. So sometimes it would start to feel like I'd plateaued or start to feel like I wasn't making progress. But the great thing is every single question that you do, whether you get it right, and almost especially if you get it wrong, it's a great learning opportunity. So by the time you go into the official test, you should be practice testing in the range where you want to be for your official score. And you should also go into it thinking, hey, I'm not going to be one and done. Because if you put that pressure on yourself, it can actually make it way more scary. But if you instead think, hey, I'm going to take this official test as practice for the next official test, then it takes some of that pressure off, might make it feel a little bit easier. And plus, if you kill it, then it's just great news, right? And if you don't, if you feel like you need to take it again, then you were already prepped for that. So I'm going to go ahead and really try to hang back tonight. I'll be sort of emceeing, passing the mic back and forth to our other teachers because they are absolutely amazing. And I learn something from them every single time that we do this. So I'm just going to hand it over. Let's go to Delia first. Delia, you want to tell us a little bit about your story and maybe your best test day tip?
Okay, so I actually started studying for the LSAT in November 2021, I guess, and I started for a bit with a different prep company before I kind of figured out that their methods weren't working for me, and then I switched to the Demon February 2022, I want to say. And then I started with a diagnostic of 155. I studied for a bit, and then I took my first official test in April 2022 and got a 171. And then from there, I knew I could do better. I felt like I had a few more points on the table. So I switched to Demon Live at that point. I was using free. I switched to Demon Live for a couple months and also did some tutoring with the Demon. And in August, I got a 180. So that's kind of my LSAT journey beginning to end. And I would say my best test day tip is just treat it like a practice test. I'm sure y'all hear that all the time, but I mean, just genuinely don't do anything differently than you do any other day. So like, don't eat a big breakfast if you normally don't, like just treat it like any regular day. I think that helped me a ton when I took the official test. So yeah. Do you want me to pass it? You got it.
Yeah, I'll take it over to Brandon. You want to go for it?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody, I'm Brandon. I started studying with the Demon in September of 2021. I should write this down because every time we do this, I always forget when I started. I studied for like 6 weeks, and the LSAT kicked me in the teeth, man. Like, it really kicked my ass. I met my maker on this test and discovered some things about myself along my journey that really helped me identify like why the LSAT was hard for me. One of those, chief among them, is my dyslexia. I see a lot of familiar faces. A lot of you know this about me. That being said, I took like 4 or 5-ish months off, tried to figure out like if law school was still like the right path for me at the time. Recommitted in the late winter, early spring of 2022. I took my first official in April. I got a 172. I was very pleased with that. I was super, super pleased with that, but I was a super splitter. Those of you who don't know me know I have a horrible UGPA, like god awful. In fact, statistically, I would be willing to bet like 80% of you have a better GPA than I do. That being said, I really knew that I needed every point to make myself a contender to get into the best institutions. So I kept trying. I took the test again in June. I got a 171. And rather than being disappointed with that and looking at it as like backsliding, I took it as a bit of like a slap in the face of what I needed to start focusing on. Worked with some of the great peers that I met using Demon Live. I know a lot of you guys have small study groups. I can't encourage you enough to go and get involved with your peers in that regard. That really helped me up my game from like advanced to mastery. Like you couldn't throw a question at me come the August test that I was not prepared to answer. Passage game, you name it. Then I sat the August exam. I got a 175 and was prepared to apply in September. So that's my journey. As far as my big LSAT tip, I'm a huge, a lot of you will know this about me. I've never known an unconfident day in my life, but I get anxious just like all of you. I've really been investing lately in this idea of swagger. Like there's a difference between being arrogant, being confident, and having some swagger. Like having swagger is where you're confident enough where you know you're unconsciously competent. You don't have to be thinking about the areas of competency that you have. And I'm looking around the Zoom call. I see lots of killers here tonight, lots of my students, lots of people here are killers tonight. The teachers are killers. Those of you I don't know, you're killers too. You've been preparing for this thing. Try to take it easy on yourself and give you the space to be a human being. This is just one step on your journey to being a kick-ass attorney. One, in the context of things, a few years from now, it's going to be one small step. So earn your swagger. Go into test day with the confidence it takes to answer any question they're going to throw at you. And I promise you're going to walk into that experience just completely ready to crush it. So good luck, everybody.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I know I've heard some students say this, and I think I dealt with this as well. When you're taking the official test, I think there's a bit of a tendency to, even on the easy questions, want to double and triple and quadruple check yourself, which is something you don't do on a practice test, right? So to go back to Delia's point, no matter if that sort of pressure starts to hit you, and it will, because your brain, no matter how much you say this is a practice test, it's going to feel like the official thing, because it is. So the more that you can tell yourself, hey, I'm confident, like Brandon said, I know that I get these questions right, so I can confidently know which 4 answers are wrong and which one is right and move on. And I don't need to spend a ton of time on questions that I typically get, right? So that's another kind of connecting those two ideas, but I thought that was awesome tips. Let's go to Eric. You're the next on my screen.
Yeah, hey everyone. I love that. Just immediately building off that, I'll jump into what was going to be my piece of advice and maybe how to build a little bit of that swagger for yourself on test day. And it was something that I tried to do, which was when you get your first official LSAT question correct, just take like an extra 2 seconds to enjoy it. Just when you get that first one right and you know that you got it right, just take a couple extra seconds to think, hell yeah, I just scored a point on the LSAT. And then keep going. I feel like taking a moment to just check in on myself, to get over that first question nerves. Once I got through it and was like, great, I got that one correct. Now the rest of the test is just the LSAT again. I think that helped me to bring my confidence into the test. So consider just allowing yourself that little moment of enjoyment. A little bit more about me. I studied with the Demon in the fall of 2021. I had been a podcast listener, and then joined the Demon, reached out when it turned out that they needed some help on the podcast. So I've been doing that for a while. My diagnostic was a 162. I was fairly lucky that LR and RC felt good to me kind of from day one. Although I needed to obviously do a little bit of work on there, but the games is where I needed to make up a ton of points. So it was a matter of grinding for a few months and slowly getting to the point where the games felt good to me. And My first official attempt was in October of 2021, scored a 170, which was the low end of my range. Had already signed up for November, anticipating I was going to take it multiple times, scored a 175 in November, and that was good enough for me.
That's awesome, Eric. Thanks. And I think he brings up a really good point, which is that every single teacher here tonight, we're not special in any way. We all had areas of this test that we struggled on, right? Like for me, it was every single one. Everything felt hard to me for a really long time. And when I went into test day, I think I had to realize that, hey, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to get every single question right to get my goal score. I just have to get most of them right. So even just changing that wording a little bit for me helped. But what does differentiate us, or is the reason that we're here teaching, it's because none of us gave up. So whether it was Eric, who had a few months of studying, or whether it's someone like Ala, who's not here tonight, but she's amazing, and it took her 2 years, your story, your journey is going to be different. It's all about persistence. And when it gets tough, you just keep going. Marissa, go for it.
Whoa, I was hoping you'd say me because I wanted to say something about what you just said. I remember thinking about this because Francesca said something about that, like there's no such thing as a 170 plus score. There's no like one thing about you. And I like think about that a lot, like being an adult and like being like, I had a rental car the other day, my first rental car, and I was like, I'm allowed to like have this. Like it's just like one of those things where you're like, these things, you don't feel qualified, but they're totally within reach. Like these things are what are like, they're happening for you, and it's because of what you've done. So just keep that in mind. I'm Marissa. I went from a 155 when I started with the Demon signing a lease. Exactly. I just applied for an apartment. Crazy. I started with the Demon in June 2022. So last June. And then I started with the 155. I took the September test, got a 162, and then took the October test and got a 173. And my advice would just be that to control what you can control. I know Peter's here and we've had this conversation before. And I think that like there were things that happened outside of my control before the September test. And I think that the most comforting thing going into the October test was like, I've done exactly everything that I can do. I've like, I've studied, I've eaten, I've been running, I've been doing all my normal stuff. Like this is all I can control. I have no idea what they're going to give me today, but like that's out of my control. So I can't even worry about it. So that's what I would say.
Awesome. Francesca, you want to bring us home?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everybody. So I did my LSAT studying also with the Demon in the summer of 2021. I wanted to get it done ahead of time so that if I needed to, I could retake it. So yeah, I started in May with the Demon. I did like a lot of research into different companies beforehand. And I was like, no, Demon is 100% the way to go. So I feel very aligned with what we're teaching now. And my diagnostic was a 157. I took the test in August, got a 176. And I was very happy with that. And the advice that I give for test day, aside from the general stuff of, like do what you've been doing, don't do anything super different leading up to it, make sure that you're fed, rested, hydrated, all that stuff super matters, like a lot. But my advice aside from that is mostly just like anxiety management advice, which I've looked into a lot out of necessity and find really helpful. I was actually just talking about mantras in class earlier, like things that you can sort of come back to that will help center you and, keep your head in the game. And I think that mantras can be helpful both when you're feeling the burnout and you're trying to get yourself motivated, because you're like remembering why you've signed up for this whole thing in the first place. But they can also help you when you're a bit too much in the game and you're a bit too like, you're in your head about how important this test day feels and all that. And a couple of things to remember about that is that, for the vast majority of you here, this test is not the hardest thing that you've had to do. This is not the most stressful, important moment that you've had in your life. And I can promise that it will not be the most stressful, difficult thing that you have to do in the future. And we were just talking about this in LR Foundations beforehand, but like the legal grind is a long one, and the LSAT is just the beginning. So I think that the key, and I'm also talking to myself here, the key is to find the level of anxiety or of caring or of obsession that is like just optimal for yourself. So like, for example, I used to play hockey growing up, and before games when I was nervous, my dad would sometimes say that, you know, a little bit of nerves is a good thing. It helps you focus. Same is true for the LSAT, right? Like for practice tests, sometimes, you know, like you want to be taking your practice tests seriously. You want to be treating them like real tests. Okay. So like a little bit of nerves is good to like let yourself feel that. It's going to help you focus on the day of and all that. But there's a point where it's too much. And, you know, I think you guys know what I'm talking about. But if you can find that degree of like intensity that feels sustainable, not just for your LSAT study grind and for however many times you have to take this test, but also for law school admissions, negotiations, choosing where you're going, and then law school, and then being a lawyer, right? This is just the beginning. And if you can find a zone that feels that you feel like, you know what, yes, I'm pushing myself, but I'm not burning out. And on the day of the test, like I'm focused, but I'm not going insane in my brain, then that, you know, that's going to really set you up for the future. But anyways, this is just the last thing about the mantras themselves. I like to think about the word relentless. That's a word that kind of fires me up. It's just about doing one question at a time. If you can relentlessly get one question after the other right, or at least start by understanding the passage, right? You guys know what the steps are to get these questions right. You've been studying, you know what the process is. You understand the passage, you make objections, whatever, prediction, all that stuff. You get it. If you can just focus on the thing that is right in front of you, one step at a time, and just relentlessly come back to whatever the thing that is right in front of you is, you will be done the test before you know it. And if you feel yourself, you know, worrying about anything beyond that, it doesn't hurt to take a couple seconds and just take a deep breath and chill, and then come back to it and just be relentless about it. That's my advice.
Man, snaps for that. I needed that advice before my August test. I was totally not in the right headspace. My anxiety completely overwhelmed me. And what I remember thinking during that test, as I was literally bombing it in the moment, was I just need to look at this question. Because every time those anxious thoughts would seep in, I would acknowledge them and let them go and think, I just need to look at this question. And that sort of strategy totally saved my score on that test. Now, I didn't get what I wanted, but it also meant I didn't bomb it either. So yeah, if that starts to happen to you, take it back to that, right? Just read the words in front of you, understand the game, understand the passage, and it will turn out okay, as long as you don't let that stress just completely eliminate all of the training that you've done so far. Because that's the thing about the LSAT, right? Y'all have spent months, maybe years studying this stuff. So no cramming between today and test day is going to make any difference to your score. It's actually all of that work that you've already put in. And that should be freeing, right? Because that means like you're ready, you're set, you're going to go kill this thing. You just have to kind of approach that mental aspect of it the right way. So that was great, Francesca. Let's see, we've all introduced ourselves. I think I would love to open it up to questions. We can chat about sort of this poll too. Some people are saying they're not quite sure if they should take it. We can cover that. But I want to get to your questions first. We would love to hear from you. We're all very good now that we're teachers at sitting in awkward silence. So we will sit until someone is brave. Yeah, David.
Hi guys, I guess I didn't want to ask this one first just because what it's about, but so with this test, I feel like we have the opportunity to like see our score before signing up for the next one. So I guess I kind of feel like I'm at a place where I'm scoring where I want to. So my question is more like, what do you guys do in that time between? How do you recommend like still studying, but also, you know, just like what the in-between time now with these like 2 months between this test and maybe the next one that we take, your approach to that, especially if people have done it multiple times.
Yeah, someone want to jump on this one, or I can?
Yeah, I can take this one, Mo. So David, I'm going to answer your story with a little bit of an anecdote here. The first thing I would say is in the meantime, between exams, I think if you haven't yet found a way to make this test enjoyable for you or studying for it, it might be a little bit too early to take it. That being said, I certainly wouldn't stop studying in the interim. Just because you're waiting for your score really doesn't give you the room to just stop keeping these skills sharp. Because what is the LSAT at the end of the day? It's a skills test. It's making sure that you have the skills necessary to be a top performer in your 1L class. That's really what it correlates to in the law school environment. But my anecdote for you comes back to something that I've been talking about in classes. I like to use sports analogies. There's a great little story about Kobe Bryant and I forget his first name, an author last name Stein, got to go and do an exercise, a workout with Kobe one day, and got to go and get into the muck of how the best player in the world takes care of his stuff. Told him, I'm going to be at the gym at 4 a.m. Are you sure you want to get up that early? He says, oh yeah, I'll be there. So he drags his ass into the gym at 4 a.m. He's exhausted. It's way too early. He sees Kobe's been there for an hour already. Kobe Bryant has been in the gym. He's got a good sweat on. He's been there since 3 a.m. And he's just doing basic foot drills and fourth grader layups. And Stein walks up and says, Kobe, you're the best player on earth. What the hell are you doing taking layups at 4 a.m? He goes, how do you think I got to be the best player on earth? I never got bored doing the fundamentals. I never got bored doing the easy stuff. And I think it correlates really strongly to the LSAT. There are some people in this classroom tonight who in their study journey will do all 400 logic games. They'll do 2,000 LR questions. They'll read 60 passages. And don't let them outwork you. They're going to be your application competition. They're going to be the ones competing for the same scholarship dollars. So in the interim between these 2 exams, find a way to enjoy the fundamentals. Find a way to make doing your footwork drills on the LSAT. Maybe that's finding necessary assumptions and arguments. I don't know, whatever that looks like for you. But find a way to keep doing that between now and the next time you might have to sign up for the test. Because what I hear when students are saying, well, I'm going to wait till my score comes out and then I'll resubscribe. I totally get it. If you're balling on a budget, we understand that you don't want to spend the extra money. Totally understandable. Not a big deal. Downgrade to free for a couple weeks and really push yourself on our free content. Then if, assuming you don't get a score that you want, or you're ready to go get the rest of the points that you left on the table, re-upgrade at that time and go back to basics. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Brandon. I also struggled with feeling a bit of burnout after my first test. I really didn't want to start studying again, but I kept telling myself, this is where I prove if I have what it takes to be a lawyer, right? If I can buckle down, if I can keep doing this, even when I don't want to, even when it may not matter because I may have gotten the score I want, then it's going to really show me that I should pursue this career. I think this is something good for me. So I get that. And hey, I wouldn't necessarily burn yourself out during those, 2.5 weeks between test day to score release. I wouldn't start taking a practice test every day or anything crazy. But I think Brandon is making a great point of find the things that you like, or maybe try to work on your weaknesses a bit and just keep it simple, right? An hour a day. Maybe you love games, do some games, whatever it is to keep you in the headspace in case you have to sign up again, but without just totally making yourself not want to take the test again. I think there's a sweet spot in there. Does that answer your question, David?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks for asking. What else, guys?
Can I ask a question?
Please.
What to do if on the test you feel yourself or you notice yourself abandoning the strategies and the teachings that got you to where you are in your practice tests? If suddenly you're thinking about the clock more, you're questioning your answer choices more than you ever do on your practice test, if suddenly your approach feels different and you notice that, what to do? Looks like Delia. Did you have your hand up?
Delia, go for it.
Yeah, I couldn't remember how to raise my virtual hand, but so I just raised my real one. I definitely felt this way when I was taking my August test, and I think my best advice is, and honestly, the feature on Demon Drilling, the meditation feature helped me so much. But my best advice is to actually stop. Don't even think about the time or how much time it takes you away from your test, because in reality it's going to be 5 seconds. But just stop, close your eyes, take a seriously huge deep breath, and recenter yourself and keep going. Because if you just keep trying to push through and you're like in a headspace that's not how you practiced at all, you're forgetting everything you know. If you physically stop to recenter yourself, it's going to help so much. And if you don't, and you just try to keep pushing through that, like it's not going to work. I promise. I've tried it. And honestly, it's so worth the 5 seconds that you lose to take a deep breath to stop and center if you need it.
Brandon, can you? Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say the only thing that I'd add is that it can be helpful to also remember, in some people, like it's possible there's somebody here that like this is your final attempt and like that's it, after that you're done. But for most people, that is not the case. And this is part of why we're always saying like you can retake the test. And that's why we say keep studying after the test, is because it should be your plan to retake it if you don't land where you wanted to within your range. That takes some of the pressure off of this administration. Of course, it's nice if you can knock it out of the park right now, do everything that you can to do that. But also, if shit really hits the fan, you've probably got more attempts, and schools only care about your highest score. So that can help.
Brandon, you want to explain box breathing?
Yeah, so as the father of a very grumpy, occasionally very grumpy toddler, I can tell you I am a champ when it comes to box breathing, as are my wife and I. So box breathing, it's just like almost like a meditation technique, like a mindfulness technique. And they call it box breathing because it's 4 equally sized little motions. Take a nice deep breath in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, pause for 4 more seconds. At the end of that 16 seconds, you will be amazed at how much cortisol you can physically feel leaving your body, especially if you actually just take a moment and embrace it. Like if you just go, okay, I'm doing the box breathing, it probably won't have the effect, right? But like if you really just take a minute and give yourself time to reset and you go through that motion, I swear to you guys, it is remarkable how much better you feel on the other side. There's a lot of psychology, a lot of biology behind that recommendation. The other thing I will tell you is I walk the walk on it. Between every single game and every single RC passage I ever took on an official, I did a box breath between every single one of them. So I coughed up technically at least 2 minutes of meditation time to my official LSATs, and it pays dividends, y'all. Think about it in terms of like opportunity cost. Would you rather be stressed for the next 16 seconds and rushing and making careless and stupid mistakes? Or would you rather come to the next thing refreshed and clear-minded and ready to attack it with the same skill set that Eric was just talking about? Those same skills that are gonna have you cashing in these points in terms of scholarship dollars. So I highly recommend giving it a shot if you're unfamiliar with it. Quick Google, you'll know how to do it by the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to say for a moment, it's funny how the LSAT can make you feel like a little bit of a hippie, or at least it did me. Otherwise, I think the anxiety would have gotten out of control. But when I researched this, because I had heard Ben talking about it, the deep breath actually draws blood away from your amygdala, which is the fear center of your brain, and to your frontal cortex, which is the logic center. So what else do we want on this test other than more blood in the logic center, right? That's what this is all about. So there are actual, like Brandon was saying, real reasons to implement this kind of stuff into your practice. And I know that Alla said that she would take a deep breath between every single question, including every LR question, and that it was a way that it kind of felt cyclical and a little bit took away some of those nerves for her. So lots of different options there for breathing. Probably didn't expect us to talk about that so much, but I think it is a really useful technique to have in your back pocket. What else, guys? What can we help you with? Otherwise, we'll just have Eric ask all these great questions for us.
Lily, there's a question in the chat that actually I can answer about Canadian schools real quick. It just got sent as a private message, but in case anybody else is curious about that, if that's all right. So they're just wondering, how high you should aim for Canadian schools, if you're not sure about they don't give out as much in scholarships and whatnot. My quick answer to that would be that it's a lot harder to tell you like a specific number that you should aim for, like where you should call it quits, because it's more of a black box, the Canadian admissions. Like they don't have the same like ABA required disclosures as the American schools, and they don't have like US News rankings. So we don't know exactly as well what goes behind their decisions. But one thing that I will say, it has taken out so much stress from my applications process to have a high LSAT score and know that I can be very confident in my outcomes in Canada. And it's opened up doors in the US that I didn't think would ever be possible. So that's something to think about. You might be dead set on staying in Canada, which honestly, respect, I totally get that. But it also takes off some of the pressure on the GPA. Like there's no downside to having a kick-ass LSAT score. But aside from that, I would just say, like, take a peek at the medians that they put on their websites, and that's kind of your best bet.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Canadian schools do feel like a black box to me as an American. So I'm so glad we have someone with the inside scoop on our brothers up north. Let's see. I think we should talk for a second to this group from the poll who are saying that they're not sure if they should take the exam this weekend. Some of my teachers chime in. How would you respond to someone who tells you they're not quite sure if they're ready or should take it?
I would probably say don't do it. I mean, I think you're like obviously going to waste an attempt, which is tough, but I also think it's like if you already have that doubt, like you have to think about how that'll affect your mental state going in, right? Like you think Brandon's swagger probably doesn't include being like, ooh, can I like even do this? Like, I don't, like we probably want to have a little bit more of an air of confidence going in. And if you're already doubting yourself, maybe it's time to be real. Like Brandon was saying, this test makes you get really real with yourself. And like, that might be a good moment to just look at yourself in the mirror and be like, I'm not going to put myself through it. It's not the time. I'll go next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and this is something Brandon just pointed out in the chat, but the only sort of shade of gray I would see there is if you are actually practice testing where you want to score, but you're so anxious or you struggle with some mental health issues that make you think you're not ready. That would be different to me. That would be, hey, you've shown us with data you are ready. So now it's time to sort of confront where that anxiety is coming from and see if you can't get that under control. But it seems like, at least according to your test history, right, your practice test history, that you are prepared. But if you're not sure you should take it, maybe you've gotten the score you want once, maybe you've never gotten it, that's a really good reason to withdraw. And it totally sucks to eat, $215, but in the long run, admissions deans aren't going to see a bad score. You're not going to waste an attempt that you could use when you're actually ready. You may end up just canceling that score anyway, right? So there's a lot of things that can happen when you're not prepared to take it that have much bigger drawbacks than simply withdrawing and waiting. And I know I had to push my own test multiple times because I had to be real with myself that, hey, I wanted to be ready by now. I'm just not. Any other comments on that one?
Yeah.
Sorry. Go for it, Delia.
I was just going to say there are real consequences to taking it if you're not ready, because the LSAC has annual and lifetime limits on how many times you can take the test. So that's why we really say, like, don't waste an attempt. You're not just wasting, like, you may think you're going to waste money if you withdraw when you're not ready, but if you take it when you're not ready, you will be wasting an attempt. So just do keep that in mind.
Francesca, were you going to comment?
Sure. Just quickly before Brandon talks about the financial side of things. Yeah, Brandon, go ahead. I've lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no worries. I just thought this would be a nice follow-up to what Delia was mentioning to you guys about the annual and lifetime limits on your test taking. So the value of your attempt, y'all, is worth so much money if you can really get into the neighborhood of 170 score or above the 75th at the school that you're really sweet on and want to go to. And the thing that I want to hammer home for you guys here around, like, I hear a lot, Brandon, I'm on a really tight budget and I can't afford to withdraw and I've got all these external pressures. If they ain't cutting the check for school, I want you to flip them the bird. Because do you guys have any idea what a 6% interest rate on $220,000 in debt in the US is? Bro, that's a mortgage payment. Good luck, because I don't care if you're making 120 grand a year at that kick-ass firm right out of your first year out of school. You're going to be paying pretty much 25, 30% of your discretionary income is going to go straight to your debt service. So if right now, for example, you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, just because you go become an attorney, if you take on all that debt, your lifestyle will not change at all, except for the fact that you're going to be buried in work. You're basically going to be somebody's lackey. Be very, very thoughtful about your financial situation, y'all. I think it's something that's really easy to overlook in this process. And I'm right there with you. We have all these external pressures saying like, you said you were going to be an attorney. This is the path you were on, you know, go to law school. We would be so proud of you. Yeah, it's really exciting to like let all those people in our life, all our loved ones, like to lift them up with our achievement. But to do that at the 30-year detriment of you and anyone else in your immediate circle, I think is a huge, huge mistake that is very avoidable. And it's very correctable at this time in your journey. It's really easy to get flustered and say, well, if not this year, then when? You know, I'm 31, I turned 32 this year. I'm on my 10th gap year. Like, you're not in a hurry. Stop telling yourself that you're in a hurry, for the love of God. You have so much time. Attorneys practice until they're 75 years old. Some of them sit in the Senate or become president until they're 80. Like, this is a real thing, everybody. You're not in the hurry that everyone in your circle, who are the voices in the back of your head, are telling you that you're in. And it's a massive mistake to put yourself in that much student debt because of these external pressures. And this test is the longest lever you can pull to change that future for yourself. So if you have any hesitancy or you're saying, well, if it's not now, then never, I beg you, just take 2 steps back, take a deep breath, and kind of look at the financial ecosystem that you might be setting yourself up for. Because it's heavy stuff, man. There are attorneys that hate their lives because they took on $250,000 in debt. And that was 6-7 years ago when the interest rates were half the expense. You know what the interest rate is on a graduate student loan starting next year? 6.72% most recently. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. That's like a mortgage rate in the 80s. So for those of you who aren't super financially robust, I implore you, go use a debt calculator. Just look at what your monthly payment will be on your debt service if you're not planning to go into like government or public service law. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. I love hearing you talk about financials because it is so not my world, but it makes so much sense once you actually dig into it. So all of you hopefully should, because law school is a huge commitment, not only time-wise, but also money-wise if you don't get that full ride. I wanted to quickly touch on a question about just confusion surrounding what counts toward my lifetime limit of tests. If you sign up for a test and then you withdraw prior to the day of the test administration, you lose your money, but you're like, hey, I'm not ready to take the test. That does not count toward your take limit. Now, if you do not withdraw and you just don't take the test, you're a no-show, that does count toward your take limit. And that is probably the worst thing that you can do. Worse than getting a really bad score, worse than anything else, because admissions committees will see no-show on your LSAC, your list of tests, and that just looks terrible. So never no-show, always reach out to LSAC. If you like wake up the day of your test and you're super sick, don't just not go, reach out, make sure they're willing to move you or cancel you, where the admissions committee will not see no-show. Because you not only lose a test, right, but you also it's going to AdComs. So that's bad. The other time it will count toward your limit is if you take the test, and then I know we have score preview now. So if you preview your score, but you decide to cancel the score, that test still counts toward your limit. Now, admissions committees won't see the score. They'll see cancel, which is, that's a decision to make. Is this score so bad that I want to cancel it? I think that has to be something you decide. But yes, so the only time it will not count toward your limit is if you withdraw prior to test day. If you don't show up or you take it, then it will count toward your limit. Hopefully that made sense. Let's see what else. I think we got some good comments about proctoring, and I think that we should take a minute on this right after we get to Dawn's question and talk about proctoring. But Dawn, you go first.
No, mine was just like something I'm just generally curious about for the application process. Like, I've always heard, like, indirectly, like anonymously, people submitting, or not submitting, but being open about their LSAT score or their LSAT score, but not being open about their GPA that accompanies it. And I was wondering, for the people that did the applications, is that, like, why is that? Because I don't know. I've never did the applications before. So it's like, it's always just the LSAT score, not with the GPA. Is that like a trade secret or something you want to guard against when you're applying? I don't know. I'm just assuming this right now, right? I don't know.
Are you talking about on like message boards like Reddit where someone will say like I have a 174 and a 3.8x, or are you talking about when you actually apply to schools redacting your GPA?
So when you're applying, not when you're already in schools. Yeah.
So as far as I know, and my fellow teachers correct me because we've all been going through this crazy process together. I think WashU in St. Louis is the only school right now that I'm aware of where you can redact either or maybe both of your LSAT score and your GPA. Of course, they still have to get their medians, so I'm not sure that it is necessarily the most strategic move. I think it depends on your own scores and how competitive you are outside of them as well. But that's the only one I'm aware of where you can do so. Otherwise, I think you are always sending in your GPA. I know it's different for internationals, and maybe Francesca can touch on that, where you don't have an actual number, I believe. I think you have like a ranking. Is that right, Francesca? It's like good, like best, good, whatever.
Yeah, so it's a little weird because international Canadian applicants are typically lumped in with American applicants. It's very similar stuff. We don't qualify for like loans and all that stuff, but other than that, it's pretty different. It's pretty similar. So I can't speak to like international beyond Canada. I know that there's like a whole other system that's going on, but that's not the case with Canada.
Okay, gotcha. Well, yeah, so I think then WashU is the only one. So certainly not a trade secret. They're going to see your GPA. It's going to matter. If you have a lower GPA, then that's even more incentive to go kill it on the LSAT. Anyone though disagree or have other comments there?
But
I think, yeah, please.
Oh, I was just gonna say, but if you're still an undergrad, get a great GPA. Like seriously, don't study for the LSAT until, if you are still an undergrad, don't start studying for the LSAT until you have your GPA like solid.
Yeah, on Delia's point, I feel like that's so important what Brandon and Delia were both saying. Like, if you've listened to the podcast, you know that Nate and Ben always talk about how law schools don't care about softs. Like, they're not going to look at you funny if you went through undergrad, worked hard, got good grades, and then took a year off, worked at a coffee shop, you know, maybe volunteered somewhere, and then studied for the LSAT and applied. Like, they want to see a good LSAT. They want to see a good GPA. They don't care about a gap, like, you know, that. I think that's the stressful energy that sometimes comes in where people are like, well, what am I going to do? It's going to look like a gap in my resume and whatever. And it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, I have a friend at Georgetown who worked at a restaurant and volunteered, and then, you know, now she's at Georgetown, and studied. So.
Yeah, Peter, go for it.
Yeah, this is related to the admissions process, and I was typing a message, so I didn't fully hear the discussion, but it sounds like what we're something similar to what we were talking about. Now that schools are withdrawing from the U.S. News and World Report rankings, I know that prior to this year, only your highest LSAT score mattered, but now that schools are sometimes withdrawing, I know that your highest LSAT is still probably the most important, but do you think schools will start to consider like an average LSAT? Because I know that's reported as well to schools. And also, yeah, this is I'm asking the question basically because it is like maybe the primary or the only source of anxiety surrounding this upcoming test for me, that I might somehow lower my average LSAT. And
yeah, let me assuage those fears. Law schools have no incentive to look at your average LSAT. So let's pretend, right, that you work at Princeton Law and you decide that at Princeton Law, you're going to look at an average LSAT score. So if someone comes in and they got a 170 and then a 173, so that's an average of a 172, but someone else came in and they just got the 172, or maybe they just got a 171, but they only took it once, right?
Well, sorry, can I change the example for a second?
Sure.
What if you have a 173 and a 173 who only took it once, and a 173 who has an average of a 172?
Okay, that's great. Yeah, so let's take that example and let's pretend that you want to go with the person who only took it once, but maybe they don't have that average, whatever. But none of your peers are doing that. So they're going to take the higher LSAT score. Who cares that they took it multiple times over someone who only took it once but had a lower score, right? So then your boss at Princeton Law is going to be like, wait, why are our LSAT medians dropping? What's going on? And then you're going to get fired. So there is no incentive at this point for any schools to care about averaging. That was something that happened like 2 decades ago. It took forever to dispel the myth that it was still ongoing. And now it's absolutely not happening. Now you're right. US News has thrown a bunch of stuff out of whack. But the good news is this. US News is still going to take into account LSAT, which means that law schools still have a really big incentive to only send the highest LSAT to get their medians higher, right? You're also going to have a much better idea of exactly what US News changed because you're not applying this cycle. You'll be applying next cycle. So for all of us who are going through it now, we're like, oh my gosh, like maybe they're really going to care about GPA way over LSAT or whatever. But you're going to actually have the time to know, because US News rankings will come out in March, April, what happened and how things are looking. So I would tell you not to worry about that at all. Even if they did decide to do that, you couldn't control it. But I can not imagine a world, especially in the next few years, where that becomes something that's happening at all. Now, fellow applicants, do you disagree? And if so, please, let's help.
Yeah,
I feel a little better.
Anecdotally, like they want hard workers, and I don't think retaking it looks bad because it shows that you're if anything, it shows that you're a hard worker that really wants this and you've tried. So yeah, I just feel like you said, there's no incentive for them to do it, and your LSAT and your GPA show whether or not you're a hard worker and that you are good at academics or not. So I just can't imagine that happening.
Does that make sense, Peter?
I think so. What do you think about my concern is like it's an indication of like privilege and potentially access to test resources if you take it 5 times. That would be my concern with how they would view your application if you have, 1 good score and 4 bad ones, something like that.
Eric, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, not necessarily on that point. I don't really know what to say about that.
I can quickly.
I suspect that's not.
That.
I suspect that's not an issue. But yeah.
So it's funny because some deans have come out and said we don't want to see 4 or 5 takes. Deans have an incentive to say what's going to work best for them in the long run, right? The thing is, I think what having 1 really good score and 4 really bad scores shows, it's kind of double-sided, right? Like you're a really hard worker, but also, did you have some improvement, right? So almost like an undergrad GPA. Did you just keep taking it and keep not improving without seeming like you put in work, or did you really take the time to actually improve? And now, I can't exactly say how every admissions committee is going to react. I would say this is another reason why it's so important to really consider whether you are prepared to take the test. So I don't think that it would be something that would really hurt you because that 1 good score is going to be the one, right? That's where their eyes are going to go to. But at the same time, I think you're thinking the way that you should be as an applicant. I think you're thinking very strategically about admissions committees and this process, and that's really good. So I wouldn't let these things worry you, but I do think something that all of us have had to work on who have gone through this cycle is being realistic and trying to see the process through their eyes and doing everything we can to mitigate any potential weaknesses that we could find in our own applications.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, Eric, go for it.
Yeah, if I could just add, I think, Lily, you correctly point out that law school admissions offices are not a monolith, and different schools are going to have different attitudes towards what you described. And we really don't know how they would react to it. For all we know, yeah, I could see why certain admissions committees, if comparing 2 applicants with the same GPA, same like everything else, same highest LSAT score, like everything together the same, I can see why they might think, oh, I prefer the one who scored 175 on test 2 rather than 175 on test 5. I guess. But I think that is like, that consideration is so small compared to all of the other, like, even in terms of the like soft factors that make up your application, I would just think that is such a small point to consider, that like, even if you get your best score the first time you take the test, like I would put good money on, like, it's better to try again 4 times and score lower each of those 4 times, just for the opportunity at like one more LSAT point. That upside is so much bigger than the potential downside of lowering your average. I just don't think it's that big a deal.
Yeah, it sounds like a super soft factor or something like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a good way to put it, Peter. Let's see, I might be missing something in the chat, but I wanted to quickly just have a conversation about proctors, because I think this is an area of a lot of stress for people. So do some of you guys want to chime in on your proctor experience, some advice for dealing with proctors? The one thing I'll quickly say is that I would always ask them not to interrupt me during my actual sections. Now, I had 3 proctors. The first one said, okay, sure, I won't interrupt you, but if I do, I'll pause the time so you don't lose time. The second one said, I will absolutely feel free to interrupt you and I will not pause the time. And then the third one said, I will never interrupt you in the middle of a section. So 3 totally different approaches there, but I think it's always worth it to open that line of communication and try to ask them that if they do have to interrupt you, they do pause that time. But let me turn it over to some other people.
Yeah, I want to echo what Lily said. Ask that to begin with, but also just be prepared. I don't want to say be prepared for the worst, because that sounds like scary, but just be prepared for things to happen that you don't expect. So when I took the test in August, and keep in mind I got a 180, I had 5 or 6 different proctors, and I also had an hour's worth of tech issues that just cut me off in the middle. And it was tough to be patient, but just know that might happen to you, and it might extend your test time. It might suck, frankly, and it might be really, really annoying, but like, just be prepared for that mentally, because there's just so many things that are out of your control. But yeah, it's just kind of part of it. And there's going to be weird things with ProctorU. There's going to be things like that happen. Just be mentally prepared for that. Don't let it affect your performance. That's just something I kind of wish someone had told me before I went in, because I went into the test thinking like, oh, this is going to go smooth. Like, we're like in the 21st century, like, why would tech be a problem? I have good Wi-Fi. And like, that's just not the case. So just keep that in the back of your mind, and don't be shocked if it happens.
I think it's a great idea to prepare for the worst, and just at least, or not necessarily, but to be aware that might happen, and to think about that in advance. I would also add, though, if this is something that, like, basically don't let this keep you up at night, because you're working with people who also want this to go well for you. Like, the proctor is, I mean, they have no incentive for you to do well, but like, they're on your side in the sense that, like, it's not, and it doesn't help them to mess with your test. That's not what they're trying to do. They're just trying to do their job. Personally, I had 0 issues. And I think that, we hear a lot of the horror stories, and don't let those freak you out, because also a lot of people just have totally 0 issues, and that might happen too.
Yeah, great points. I will say a few just really like small things to be aware of. You can't speak aloud or mumble. That will get you in trouble unless you have accommodations to do so. So be aware of that. The other thing that I noticed people talking about was that people said that if they asked their proctor if they could use Command F, some of the proctors said no. Now, LSAC has been very open about the fact that Command F is allowed. So we have to realize is that the people who work for ProctorU, they don't always know all of LSAC's actual rules. So if you know something in your heart that you can do, you're like, hey, I know I can use Command F. Don't ask your proctor, just do it. If they flag your test for doing it, LSAC is going to clear you. The bigger problem is going to be if you ask, they say no, then you do it. right? That's going to get you in some more hot water, potentially just with the proctor flagging you, whatever else happens. So for things like that, Command F, don't ask, just do it. For things about like building a relationship, like please stop the time, that you should ask about. So just try to be a little bit strategic there. Brandon, looks like there's a question about a monitor. I feel like you're my go-to for tech. So you want to jump on that one?
Yeah. You are only allowed to have the devices with you that have been expressly permitted by LSAT for your specific test administration. If you don't have it in writing and ProctorU has not affirmed that accommodation or need, you are not allowed to take it. So that goes for all sorts of things. Now, I don't know the list, exhaustively off the top of my head, but from personal experience, I had to fight a big battle with ProctorU's support staff just to use a keyboard, for example. Like I had to get them to say I could do that, even though, like Lily was saying, LSAC's policy was that it was perfectly permissible. So whatever device in the specific list that LSAC has provided you in your, or they call it the candidate agreement, what you have to sign off on when you're getting signed up. But if it's not listed there, you may not take it. And I mean, they will ask you when you're scanning your room. I mean, if you have a can of Coca-Cola on your counter, they're going to tell you to get rid of it. You're adhere to the list and make sure that whatever you have with you is tuned up and ready to go. ProctorU actually has a pretty decent tool for like testing your devices beforehand. They have some really, I would say, above consumer grade knowledge requirements for what your machine needs to be able to do. For example, you have to have a certain amount of RAM. You have to have a certain amount of processing power. Some consumer level devices, if your laptop or your tablet is 4 or 5 years old, you haven't upgraded it yet, it might actually be underperformant for the requirements. So go to ProctorU, test those things beforehand. The tool is great, it takes 30 seconds. No extra screens. If you're taking it in a room that's got TVs or other monitors, or if you share your workspace with someone in your home, you got to make sure all that stuff's cleared out, or they're going to meticulously have you kind of examine it with your phone or your computer camera and show you all of that stuff. So TLDR, if it's not on the list, don't bring it.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it might be more useful to spend tomorrow not like stressing yourself out trying to do a practice test, and instead just get your station ready, right? Move things out of the room, get your water bottle, get your 5 sheets of paper, all of that stuff prepared so that hey, I'm feeling good. I have all the sort of mechanical, I guess you could say, things done, and I'm just looking to actually crush it now. David said something about RAM. I had the same issue, and I had a newer computer. I had to look up how to clear RAM, which I had never done in my life. And once I did that, it helped a lot. So I think that's something that you can sort of combat on your own, like without having to get a different computer, hopefully. But yeah, I had to do that. So yeah, clearing cache. Yeah.
One way you can do that, is by clearing your browser cache. I would warn you guys, don't do this 12 hours before the exam, because when you clear your browser cache, you clear out all of your saved passwords. And if you don't know what your password is for ProctorU, don't put yourself in that position to be stressing yourself out when you go to sit the exam. You can clear your browser cache, and that will help free up some RAM for sure. If that's a limitation issue for you, just be aware that it might delete your passwords.
Terrence, what's your question?
I know trying to decide like if taking the test is a good idea is like a subjective thing, but what if you just in general have test anxiety? So it's like you're always going to think that you're never ready. So what do you do in that situation? I haven't taken the exam officially at all. So, but like I've pushed it back a couple of times, not thinking I'm ready. But I feel like at some point you have to take it at least once. So I was wondering, like in that situation, how do you approach that?
Can I take this one, Mo?
Absolutely, please.
So Terrence, I'm actually going to Socratic method you here a little bit. What's something you're good at, my dude? Just something you enjoy doing, something you have a talent for.
Sports, exercise.
Yeah, exercise. You play basketball, football. You good at sports in general?
Track.
Okay, you did track. How do you know you were good at track?
I was beating everyone else.
Yeah, you were winning, right? I'm assuming you went to track practice. I'm assuming you did drills and sprints and occasionally a 400 or a mile, right? Like you had a routine, right? Yeah. Same shit, dude. This test is skills. And I know that's so weird to like distill it down to sports analogies all the time, but it is a skills test. And so people who tell me like, I have general test anxiety, I hear you, man. Like I totally hear you. Lots of your peers do too. And when you go, no matter how prepared for it you are, because it's this big thing, you're going to have like some natural fears, some natural anxiety. That's That's healthy. You know, likening it to track again, I'm sure occasionally before your big races, you probably felt a little bit of butterflies in your stomach. That's healthy. That's normal. It's your brain telling you you're engaged, but you know you're ready when, despite that, you go, yeah, if I get a necessary assumption right now, I know exactly how to answer that question. If I get a parallel flaw, I know exactly how to answer that question. If I get a game, I know exactly how to solve that game. Like, that is different when that's your lens for dealing with test anxiety, because you earn that confidence. You're never going to be completely devoid of those jitters, like, and why you probably shouldn't be, frankly, but you earn your confidence on this test. And the sooner you accept the idea that it's like a learnable, trainable thing that with repetition, you'll actually be able to do like a sprint, the sooner you'll be ready to sign up for it when you're actually ready.
Thank you.
Peter.
Hey, also, I feel like I might as well try to, I've taken the test 4 times. This will be my last time tomorrow, but I have a lot of experience with taking the test. And one thing I've realized on the test is that a huge breakthrough point for me was that breathing is actually one of the skills tested on the test. So, I mean, you're going to have these nerves, but like you need to get good at breathing, and or else, you know, because people say like, oh, you're going to be calm on test day or you're not going to be calm on test day. It's not really binary like that. Like if you get worked up on test day, you need to be able to calm yourself down through breathing. And I found that to be one of the most important skills to develop. So yeah, practice deep breaths. It's like one of the things you can think of as like a good breath is like when you're rowing a boat. It's not like short and quick, but it's long and thorough. It'll get like, if your paddle should be in the water longer and your breath should be deeper. You should take long, deep breaths as to like short breaths. And so anyway, all to say that it's a skill you can develop and that it will help your test performance. And I would argue that it's kind of a necessary skill to develop because nerves are so natural.
Yeah, Peter, did you practice that on your practice test?
Yeah, I mean, I do. The drilling feature helped me a lot with it. I just breathe. I guess similar to, I can't remember one of the demon teachers you mentioned, but I take 2 deep breaths before every LR question. I treat it as an investment of time as opposed to, you know, something that's costing me time. It's very much integrated into my test taking strategy. It's just part of what I do, and it's a skill that has helped a lot. I mean, just like I've seen the numbers go up, like from not doing it to doing it, and it's very very helpful. It's just part of rather than external to doing well on the test.
That's super well said. Go crush the test and then come join us as a teacher here, Peter. I think you have a lot of wisdom. You might be sick of the LSAT, in which case I totally understand. But you've been working your ass off, dude. So I really hope it goes super well for you. Are you taking it Friday or Saturday?
I have it coming up on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, Friday morning.
That brings up a good point, and a reason to potentially sign up for Friday, which is that it eliminates the possibility for you to go on Reddit and try to find out things about the test. And let me tell you from experience, that is the worst thing that you could possibly do, because not only are you going to see that section was the hardest ever, you're going to see horror stories of proctors. Everything that you shouldn't be hearing prior to the test is going to be on Reddit. So just do me a favor, stay off Reddit. I will allow it after the test, maybe, but certainly not before. If there's like one thing I could pass on, it would be that. So if you can sign up for Friday, I always recommend it just to get it out of the way. Okay, team, I think I'm going to go ahead and stop the official recording, and then I'm going to hang out. Maybe some of our other teachers will, and we will keep answering any questions that you have. But thank you so much for being here. We can't wait to hear how the test goes. You always have us in your corner. If you need to reach out for anything, we are happy to help in any way that we can.